Welcome to day 2 of the virtual summit. And this session is actually going to be more like a virtual summit or a virtual session in a virtual summit. Like Naga said, suddenly the internet was clamped down in Rajasthan and Chhavi could not get connected. So we were looking at how best we can probably simulate that or get her own points that he wanted to convey today. And what we did was an experiment to try recording a conversation on the phone, which happened just a very short while ago. So there's no time to edit. So this is the raw recording that I thought I will play. And it's roughly about 20 minutes. And then we can have some Q&A, or Naga and I will try to at least answer like what Chhavi might have. Otherwise, we'll take it to Chhavi and then get the answers to you guys later. So just give me a moment. Hi, good afternoon, Chhavi.
Hi, Shiv. Sorry about this bizarre way of doing the session. I think this is going to be the first time I'm doing something where I'm actually not present. So,
yeah. It's just that at least we had your voice, so that as podcasters, I guess everyone will be familiar with just audio as a medium.
Great. Happy to.
Yeah. See, one of the probably neglected aspects of many podcasts is the attention to intros and outros. So, Agar, if you can share with the audience, what is an intro or what is an outro?
Sure. So technically, an intro is real and an outro. They're short for introduction, and outro is just outro, which is a composite word made up to be an opposite of intro. And it is the bit of audio, that is music, voice, or interview clips, that make up the first 2 to 3 minutes at the start and end of your show. So intro is pretty self-explanatory. It introduces your episode to listeners, and the outro is the conclusion. And this is the very end of the show, and it's the place where I recommend people put their call to action, whatever that may be for your podcast. So and the intro usually is somebody like the host telling people who they are, what's coming up in the show, what is the actual theme of the entire podcast, and it's the signal, it's a beacon about what listeners can expect. It's a little bit of a warm-up. It's the bit where you meet somebody, and before you get into the meat of the matter, you set up the stage.
Yeah, sometimes we find show notes also covering these points. Is it good to read out the show notes?
No. So, absolutely not. The thing with intros is that let me back up a bit. So the reason we even have intros for podcasts is because when podcasts started, it was basically borrowing from other media, mostly radio. And in radio, especially in India, where everything on your radio dial sounds the same, you have to identify yourself as a station before and after every ad break, every song, because otherwise the listener doesn't know what they're listening to. But a podcast is not only a different beast, it's consumed totally differently, right? It's a pull medium. Everyone who's listening to you hasn't accidentally turned the dial in a car without being able to see your name and just accidentally landed on you. They've chosen you. They know your name, they know your guest name and your podcast name, and chances are they've seen the title, decided to listen, maybe even seen who the guest is, and looked up your show, and they have looked up your show notes. So do your guest the favor and the respect of understanding that they are choosing to listen, and if they wanted to read the show notes, they will, so don't replicate it. And another thing is that this is an attention economy. I mean, we not only have podcasts, but we have YouTube and all kinds of other media clamoring for your audience's attention. Don't lose them. Don't lose them by repeating something that they could easily get somewhere. And that, of course, definitely is very crucial for your content. So you're not giving them in podcast form what they could consume in another form, but it's even more crucial for your intro, because those first few seconds are what's going to hook them, and that is the difference between them staying on and listening to you or actually just pausing, switching to the next show, the next episode, or simply turning off their podcast app and giving their attention to somebody else. So don't be repetitive. Be respectful of your listeners' intelligence. Definitely don't read out your show notes in your intro, and keep it lively, keep it really, really interesting. So I think what makes a good intro, there are three things that I talk about in my workshops from all the things I've listened to as a consumer as well as a producer. And the first thing is that it has to immediately grab your attention, and it has to be brief, and it has to be relevant. So you have to do those things and not also replicate something else at the same time. So a lot of people use a clip from their interviews to start the episode. I'm a big fan of this. I call this digging for the gold clip and then using it as ear bait. It's the thing that gives you a flavor of what's coming up, what your guest sounds like, and obviously you've done the due diligence of finding that amazing piece of audio that is going to hook your listener right at the start and be compelling so that they want to listen to the rest of the show. Another good thing to do is to billboard. So what you do is just like a hoarding, or the index of a book. You give people an idea of what's coming up without giving the ending away. So dangle the bait. Tell people something about your takeaway or what you think will be valuable to them or what to look out for, but without actually giving it away. And in my workshops, I play a bunch of intros from podcasts that tell listeners about themselves, their show, and topic. And I found that actually goes over very badly. When you're doing it yourself, you don't realize that you're just following a trend or following the rule of thumb. But there is nothing to constrict you or constrain you into following this format. So don't do that. I feel like you don't have to share everything about your episode, about your podcast. So, for example, you'd be like, I'm Chhavi, and you're listening to the XYZ show where we talk about all the wonderful things that happen in your oven. And today my guest is a baker extraordinaire. Her name is this, and she has done this, and on and on and on and on. So this actually is where show notes and stuff come in. I feel like you're wasting your audience's time. Use the show notes to do this stuff. Credit them with knowing how to search online and find extra stuff about your person. And the other thing you can do is make a trailer so that people understand what your podcast is about, so you don't have to repeat that in every episode. And I have increasingly become impatient with any intro where you sound like you're reading out your guest CV. So instead, what I would suggest people do is tell your listener, tell me why you're excited to have her on your show. And by extension, why I should be excited about her being on her show, on your show. I don't care what they do outside of work. I don't care where they went to school. I don't care where they got their MBA, because that comes to the next point, which is it needs to be relevant. So, be brief. Don't read out the CV and everything that makes them just go on and on. Don't waste their time by talking about everything that is about your podcast and yourself, and be relevant, which means really talk about why your audience should care that they're on the show. So at this point in my workshop, I usually play the first 5 minutes of a debate. It's called Resilient, where the host, Frank Terrell, is talking about a guest and how when he first heard of him, he was excited to meet him. And then when he met him, he was really shaken by the fact that he breaks all the stereotypes. He has a ponytail and how he comports himself. And it's a 5-minute long intro, so it's not brief, but it is relevant and it is engaging because he's building word pictures. And before the guest even starts talking, but I'm invested because Frank is so excited about him and he's described him for me, and the energy is so amazing that I'm ready for that, and I can read the show notes to see what else that man has done. And finally, I think in an intro, I don't want to hear the hi, welcome to the show if you're doing an interview. Like that stuff is your banter, your warm up and setting the stage behind the scenes. Just delete it. Start with the meat of the subject. Otherwise, you're just You've just wasted 5, 10 seconds of my time. Just get on with it. So those are some very basic things that, in my experience, I think make a good intro. And I'm happy to summarize them again slowly another time.
Yeah, wonderful. There's another question which
Uh-huh.
you find in pretty much all the groups. Everyone says, where can I find free intro music? So two things there.
Oh,
One is about using music, and second is about free music.
right. So honestly, again, music is a hangover from radio and also a little bit from television. And I think tastes change. Increasingly, I'm finding a lot of podcasts that don't even use music, and I find that refreshing. I feel like, yes, just let's start. Like, why do we need all this music? That said, music is important because it helps set a tone, and it lets people know if you're expecting something upbeat or mellow or somber. So that's something to pay attention to. Your music tone should match the tone of your intro, definitely, as well as the rest of your conversation. There are a bunch of places you can look for Creative Commons music. Archive.org is one, freesounds.co.uk, I think. Even on YouTube, there are library packs of Creative Commons music. So you can do that. If you're podcasting professionally or you've got a little money, you can also look for licensed music. Audio Jungle, Audio Blocks are good places to look. And then these have reasonable rates where you can either pay for one piece of music, or if you're producing for multiple people, you can pay like one fee for 3 pieces of music. And I intend to do that a lot because I work with multiple podcasts. The thing to look for, though, is the fine print. Some of them give you outright usage. Some of them don't let you use them for podcasts. And others are a subscription model, and you don't want that. That means you'll have to pay them an annual fee every year for the whole lifespan of your podcast. So read the fine print. Don't get tied into something that is subscription. You want to just do an outright one-time payment if you're paying. But look for Creative Commons music. There's a couple of, I think freesounds.co.uk is one where it's barter. Like you upload something and they let you download as many as you want. And I found them very, very useful. Not just for Foley effects, for loops. Look for loops and you can do a search by corporate, uplifting, happy, folky, things like that. And it's usually quite easy to find music.
Wow.
But you can also do without it. So don't feel like you have to.
Okay, that's really good advice. Now, what about outros? What's an outro?
So an
Do you need an
outro,
outro?
yes, you definitely need an outro because, like when you're listening to an interview podcast, especially features and stuff, we build it in when we're scripting. But an interview podcast, like when you've had a conversation and then you just end with the "Thanks for having me, great to have you on the show." As a listener, I find that particularly dissatisfying because you, as the host, are my link to this show, right? I come back because you are the constant. You are the conduit for this entire conversation. You're channeling it. You're asking questions. You're leading me somewhere. So I need you to wrap this up for me. Either tell me what you thought about it, or better still, tell me your takeaway. Tell me what you enjoyed about it. And honestly, just delete that stuff about "thanks for having me, great to have you." All that is just filler. Leave it. Wrap it up for the audience and personalize the takeaway. I would not include the goodbyes, for sure. Tell me as a host, like what you're thinking about. What has this left you with? What is the lesson that you're going to come back to? What do you think the listener is going to find valuable? Tie it up for me. Finish the episode. And finally, for a host, an outro is a very good place to put a call to action. So there are some podcasts that put this right at the top. That's fine, experiment with the flow, no problem. But I feel like if people have listened to the end, this is a good place to put the stuff you want them to do for you. Support us, like us, review us, read more about this topic, go find a petition here, look in the show notes for more stuff if you want to do a deep dive. Send us your questions on this email address. So always wrap up. Don't throw away the opportunity to put in a call to action because this is where your engagement will come from and you want to reiterate that. So I think outros are massively important, but they have to have that personal touch.
Okay. And what about the outro music?
Again, I feel like outro music generally is, just the rule of thumb, the way things go is that it's the same as the intro music, except you fade it up and then you fade it out at the end, as opposed to, you start with the outro music usually starts louder and then fades out under the voice. So you buy one license, or, you've got one theme, you just put it in there. I feel like more and more it's becoming a take it or leave it sort of situation. And if you're not working with a professional sound engineer, sometimes finding music is quite a challenge. And it can take a lot of time to find something that matches your mood, matches your tone, and then is in your budget. So again, I'm very much, I really feel like it's a personal choice, and more a choice you can do without, honestly.
Okay, thanks. So before you said you would summarize, do you want to share your special offer for the audience today?
My special what, sorry?
No, you said that you were willing to review a few of the intros and outros.
Oh, yeah, sure. Actually, there's one other thing to talk about, and I think it's relevant to the subject, which is, do you record your intro and outro live, like during the interview itself, or do you record it after? And I get asked this in my production workshops, and I have a mix of approaches I use. So I thought I'd just address that for anybody who's still wondering. So it is definitely an individual choice. Back when studios were being used pre-COVID, it was easier and more efficient, obviously, and less time-consuming and also economical if you record it all in one go. So you're with your interviewee and you just say, "Hi, everybody. I'm whoever, my guest is whoever, and today we're talking about whatever." Or, "I'm looking forward to talking to my guest about this stuff. You're going to love it." And then you record the outro right then, which is, "I'm really going to think about what you said, and I'm sure when the next time I make coffee, I'm going to try this method. I can't wait to try it, blah, blah." You finish your outro. But the drawback there is you must prepare and anticipate ahead of time, or really be good on the fly so that you can put that outro together in the spot. But then it's done, right? And it's a wrap, and you have all your audio all in one place, and you don't have to pay your studio or your technician or anybody more. And you have to also count on your guests not to fidget while all that is happening, because you're essentially doing a monologue. Mm-hmm. But now in post-COVID times, I think most of us we're not going to studios, so we have the luxury of making as many takes as we want. And so you can record your intros and outros after. Also, when I'm producing a series, what I used to do is we would do all the interviews, maybe 6 interviews out of 12, and then go into the studio and do the intros for the first 6 episodes and the outros for the first 6 episodes contiguously after the fact. And I'm a fan of doing it after the fact because it gives you more time to cogitate and compose your thoughts and really lead with the salient points, and then close with a more thoughtful sum up, because you've had the time to process it and look at the notes or decide what you want to highlight. So it's up to you, but I think in post-COVID times, there is no amazingly good reason to do a cold live intro or outro. You might as well do it later if your work style and situation allows. So that was one thing I thought I would share.
Yeah, that's really useful, because many times we wonder whether we should ask the guest to summarize, or as a host we need to summarize.
You could do both and then take a call later, depending on what your show flow is. But I feel connected to the host. In all the podcasts I listen to, and I binge on, it's because I have a connection to the host. And I'm relying on that host. That host is my friend. That host is somebody I trust. So I want to hear their take on it. I don't want to hear the person who's being invited to just talk about themselves. Really, I want that filter.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I suppose because of today's sudden technology limitations, you're not able to share some of those examples.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sad. And I'd gotten some crowdsourced intros where brave people sent me the first 3 minutes of their podcast episodes to critique live. Mm-hmm. And I would have been happy to. It's just right now I have no way to share them. So if it works out, I'd be happy to do a session later and even take some more submissions, whatever, you guys decide is the best way to take this forward. I feel really bad for not being able to fulfill that promise to our audience.
No problem, Chhavi. Because these were not things that we anticipate or we have any control over.
No.
Yeah.
Just makes you realize how dependent we are on the internet. But,
right.
Yeah, the show must go on. So thank you for still giving me the space and time to do this. Unfortunately, of course, we can't take a live Q&A. But once the internet is back, I'm happy to engage with whoever. And you can find me on Twitter, Sonologue, or me as Chhavi. And I'm sure you and Naga and Seth will share the intro critique session of whenever we can plan it, this coming week or the coming weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of our audience would love to get your comments and your review and critical inputs to improve the intros and outros. And thank you also
if I haven't scared them off, right?
Yeah. And thanks for agreeing for this experiment. I hope that this recording will play well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the first time that you're also trying this. But definitely nothing like hearing it from the horse's mouth. Even though we did have a backup plan saying whether Naga and I should talk about it, but this is definitely far better. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making the most of the situation. I applaud the flexibility, and everybody in the audience as well. Thank you for being flexible with this presentation. And I hope it's useful. Happy to engage with all of you. I hate not being there, but find me later and we'll chat intros and outros. So thank you all.
Sure.
Thank you for.
Thanks. Okay. Now I can't get my video to turn on. Naga, if there are some questions, and there's one question.
Folks, in case you have any questions on intros and outros, I think we have another couple of minutes that we can take it till. I'm sure there are also a lot of our speakers in the attendees. I can see Nikesh, I can see Shandy, and I can see Sneha, I can see Preeti, I can see Neha, a lot of other familiar faces as well. So you're in good hands in case you have any questions. In case there was one question, I think. What are show notes? Shiv, there's one question we had on what are show notes.
Yeah. You want to take a stab while I refresh my browser?
Yes. So show notes are that small piece of text that comes below a particular podcast episode. That is what is called as a show note. So what Shiv was specifically referring to is that he was asking, do we just read out the show notes in the intro or no? So Chhavi said that no, you're not supposed to just read out the show notes because the listener can get that either ways. So how else can you personalize the experience and make it in a way that I can be hooked in order to find out why I should listen and what the whole show about or what that particular episode is about.
Yeah, also I hope. Yeah, nobody got turned off. She said you may be scared because some of the things that she said were kind of contra what you normally find in intros and outros. She said she would rather do it differently.
Yeah. I would take her advice, and I'm sure for whoever have listened to the Passion People podcast, I do exactly what she said. So there is the first few seconds of the episode is just about the best parts of the entire show, and then I do like a small introduction, and then the show starts. But where I've not done so well, I feel, is the outro, because the outro is done by someone else.
Mm.
Yep. So Aarti is asking whether it's all about how you stand out. It's not only about how you stand out, right? Like let me take a cue from Nikesh's presentation yesterday. He said that you can have like stunning visuals so that you can stand out and you can get your audience to listen to your show. Now you've already got their attention. It's about keeping it, right? You've already stood out. Now how do you maintain or keep their attention? So that's what it's about. It's not only about standing out, but also sustaining that attention span. And like Chhavi mentioned, we're living in an age where everyone is being bombarded with so many stimuli and so many screens and so many avenues to read and absorb information. So why should someone listen to what we are saying or anyone else is saying?
I think that's a nice way of putting it. The cover art and the intro kind of coalescing, and then kind of cover art taking you to the next stage of intro.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. All right, there's another question. So Kirti is asking, is it possible to share contact details of her and other members so we can approach for some additional info related to the podcast? Yes, definitely. I've shared Chhavi's Twitter handle on the chat message. You will also note that you will get an email from us thanking you for attending the event with all the speakers' information, as well as a marketing opt-in form that I will share again in a bit, where you can share your details in case you're okay to be reached out by the speakers. So yeah, that's going to happen, not a problem. So Sandesh is asking, sure, thank you, Kirti. So Sandesh is asking, so when she said the relationship of the listener is with the host, isn't the episode about the guest and what the guest wants to say? Do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yes, the listeners do want to hear the guest stories, but they come because of you, because there is a certain predictability. And yesterday also we spoke about that. When things are predictable, then there is so much more familiarity, and then they do come back to listen to you. So it is your show. And then they are the guests. Yes, they are going to be highlighted. They will share their experiences. That is going to be valuable. But the connect, the moment someone hears your voice, is that, I know this person, or I know what I can expect, right? Yeah, Naga?
Yep. Just to add to what Shiv mentioned, it's also about you as the host who's curating the entire experience, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're choosing the theme of your show, you're finding out who your target listener is, you're finding the guests, you're validating them. You're doing all of this legwork just to give your guest a platform so that they can come and talk as per a particular theme that's in line with what you want or what your podcast wants. So while it is about the guest, I always go back to what Vijay said yesterday. It's always about the listener. It's not about you. It's not about the guest. It's always about the listener and giving them what they want. And Nikesh yesterday, he told us that people get into a routine. People want predictability. Even Shiv is also saying the same thing, right? So once you change that up, then people just feel like they've been betrayed or they don't want to go through that. So I feel that it's a challenge between finding a balance between how do you experiment while making sure that your listeners have the least amount of listener experience disruption. All right. There's another question on how do you ensure better keywords for your show notes, like use of SEO, or is Google Trends a good option? I don't think I'm a good person to answer this. The only thing that I remember hearing from other podcasters is that the best thing for your SEO is to make sure that your podcast has a website, because Google is now indexing websites of podcasts. So when you search for your podcast, you need to make sure that in the Google search option, there's a way for Google to just play your episode as part of the Google page itself. So that's something that's supposed to be really good for SEO. Shiv, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, same. Again, the show notes came up mainly because only text was indexed. And for better SEO searches, people used to repeat, people used to have some things in the metadata and all that. But now Google has started, and they're saying that they will index audio as well. And they do show up in your Google searches. And like Naga says, you'll be able to play from there. So have a website, maybe have the notes and whatever other topics you want to add there. So they can probably be added to those.
Yep. Shaino, hope that answers your question. That's all that we have time for as part of the current session on good intros and outros. We hope that you enjoyed that one.